online partners. And too bad I can't offer you coffee, but you could smell it. All right. I'd like to welcome Patty, and she was not here last weekend. So, where are you from?
I'm from Wawa. It's north of Sault Ste. Marie.
Wow. Who traveled the farthest?
It would be 10-hour drive. 10 hours.
Where about? 10 hours drive. Wow. That's dedication, isn't it? Right. And who else is not? Oh, Scott, you were not here last weekend, right? So what?
Saturday.
Oh, you were here in the beginning.
I was here on Saturday.
You were here on Saturday, right? Anybody needs introduction here? All right. Today we have a busy day, and so I thought we will want you to feel at home and relax, and also we wanted you to learn and really interact with one another. And the first thing we wanted to do is to talk about, one mistake. I was doing it at 7 o'clock this morning on the revised agenda. And I guess subconsciously I want health breaks for an hour. Okay, for Saturday from 1 to 2:30. Paul's going to give the 6th lecture on self in humanistic existential therapy. And then we take 15 minutes health break. And then from 2:45 to 3:30, no, you cannot take a nap. And he will continue with that lecture because it will be longer than just an hour and a half. Okay? Let me just. Hi, Simone. Thank you.
Yes.
I just did.
Just jumping.
Yes?
I didn't get a copy of the presentation.
Oh, we'll send them later. Oh, you want to get it?
They need them because they can't see it on the side. Is it this one?
No, I'm going to start with this one.
Is there another one there?
What was it? Oh, yeah, you got to get that in at the end, right?
Still on Friday? I'm glad I didn't do it. I'm glad I had to. On Thursday, we left early.
Should have been.
I've always heard that. I think it's both. Hi, how are you?
If you find one copy, I'll make some more on that.
Question on the registration.
And I send you the email. for the syllabus. How many people have worked on the inventory of self last week? Very good. And how long did it take you? 2 hours?
Yeah, a couple of hours.
Well, thinking, you have to think about it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Leave it and walk away and think about it.
Now, I do not require you to bring it back today because after this weekend, you might change your mind and you might have more time thinking about it. So you could take as long as you want, and the deadline would be 2 weeks after tomorrow. Is that good? And you, because it's very confidential, so you could send it by mail or you could email it to me and I will print it out and delete. Is that okay? That will ensure confidentiality. What do you think of the syllabus? Phew, right?
Excuse me, can we get an email?
You want the agenda in the email?
No,
Can they email the inventory to you? Is that what you meant?
no, can we get it by
Can you get
email?
via email? Do you, yeah, you have PDFs, just, right? For the inventory yourself, we can email it. Yeah, we
Yes.
can email it to you.
Well, Simone, thank you for the coffee. You know, before we go on, I'd like to thank my helpers, and they have been tremendous help. And Simone, Steve, Josh, and Teresa in the kitchen. Thank you very much for your help. It looks like, you know, there are so many readings and so on. It is a good resource for you. And within 4 days, we've tried to cram a whole course, a 30 hours course. So it is very difficult to cover everything. And it's also difficult to have, you know, all the readings done. So that's why we send it to you. And so hopefully you will take it seriously. Those articles are very helpful, and this will be your resource. Yes, Patty, you have a question.
So the course requirements, if we received the completion of the inventory of self, the case study of effective use of self. I didn't hear about that last day, so you'd like us to complete that?
You mean
There were
the,
2 in course requirements, a case study of the effective use of self, about 2 pages.
Mhm.
So that, when would that be due?
Everything will be due 2 weeks after the course. Because I know everybody's working and it's just busy, and we just want to make it as easy as possible, and yet you get the most out of the course.
We use an example of a mistake that we've made, like something that, where we realized and then changed it.
Either or successfully use self and what you learn from it. And this is why what we're going to be doing a little bit of group discussion and open forum so that everybody will feel, you know, relieved and say, yes, I can talk about this. And if I don't have a supervisor to talk to, I can talk to colleagues. And everyone here, no, we always talk about limits of confidentiality. Anything that we share, even within this class, will be kept confidential. And what are the 3 limits?
So, harm others, and abuse.
And yeah,
Abuse.
and abuse. Okay. Did you hear that?
No.
Good, excellent. So this is why we can be free to talk about how we felt about it, what's happening, and how we use ourselves successfully or use ourselves inappropriately, and you regret and you don't know what to do. You know, but we always talk about it. And make sure when you are talking about a case, no names, and you can modify the situation a little bit. Is that okay? Now, a multiple choice exam. Why do we put that in? Why do we want an exam? I mean, if I could do away with exam, I hate exams, right? And everybody hates exams. But what can you replace exam with what? It's hard, right? So we thought we will do a multiple choice exam and stimulate your thinking and your reasoning. And we don't mark it. And we give you the answers at the end so that you know how much you have learned. Does that make sense? Because you are mature learners, right? You're here driving 10 hours here because you're motivated to come. Yes?
So Lilian, I think Paul went over a multiple choice exam before, and I thought we did it already. Is this something different?
That was for that particular title,
Oh.
right?
Okay.
This one will cover the whole course.
Got it.
So, are there any questions? I'll tell you why I put our logo on it, because I just wanted to tell you these are all copyrighted. And I still have problems sending, I'm very honest and transparent, okay? I do have problems sending out all the PowerPoints through emails. And I find it sometimes, we are very ethical. We need to practice, ethics and standards of practice. But then out there it may not be appropriate for other people who are not in the field. And sometimes I don't know how to resolve that problem, but we will send you what we have so that you wouldn't have to struggle because you are our students. But I do not want it to go public until we resolve how do we protect our materials. Does it make sense? Okay. Okay, now, other questions regarding the syllabus? I do have some of those articles on my computer. So those are reading, I'm going to try to get my assistant to send them out to you. Okay, so sometimes it's hard to search and hard to find. Is that okay with everything? Yes, Scott.
Would any of these be on meeting.ca already, or?
Some of them may have, but this is the fourth time we run this course, and sometimes I find that these articles are very helpful for the students. Because so often we learn and we try to remember, but when we want to retrieve it, where did we find it, and what was the quote? Just being authentic. All right. That's all the announcement that I have. And for those who did not have the today's agenda earlier, I made a mistake. The second health break actually is a lecture. All right. Okay, let's talk about.
Sorry, you can't use this first.
Oh, I can't use.
No.
I am so sorry. You see limitations of technology, right? Okay. Okay. You have worked on the inventory of self. Which area you find the most difficult, that is challenging, and you're having difficulties writing it down? Noreen?
Do you have a copy of it?
Oh, this is the problem. I don't have my desk to put my stuff on.
Where would you like to have it?
Thank you.
Where would you like to have it?
Just where I could reach.
Up here?
Yeah. And you have your copy, right? You didn't have. Okay. All right, then I will go over it. My attractive characteristic, personal trait. Anybody have problem with that?
Only insofar as overthinking it, maybe, is that true? How do I know that's true? I kind of got caught in that with looking at that one.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Hmm.
How many of us, how do you know what you are? I'm going to go around here. Each of you say one word that represents who you are in terms of personal characteristics. What do you know about yourself, who you are? What's the first thing that stands out in your mind?
I'm very much the
So you still carry around, you say, I'm the youngest child.
I'm still my mother's baby.
All right. It is what people see you, right?
Perception.
Okay, let's just go quickly. Can you give us a Hannah?
I believe her. I believe her. I believe.
You believe. Okay.
I think I'm an optimist.
You are optimistic. Mm-hmm. Noreen?
Competent.
Competent. Right.
Passionate.
Passionate.
Confident.
Confident.
Poised. Poised.
Poised. All right. Rita?
Facilitator.
Uh-huh.
Inspirational.
Rita?
Inspirational.
Inspirational. And, right.
Sense of humor.
Louder?
Sense of humor.
A sense of humor. We need that, don't we? Scott?
Determined.
Determined? Patty?
Healer. Healer.
Healer?
Driven.
Dream?
Driven.
Oh, driven.
Resilient.
Resilient?
I'd say gifted, competent, that kind of. That's how I feel.
Competent? All right.
Sincere.
Sincere? Sharon?
Enigma.
This echo is bothering me.
Enigma.
Oh, yeah.
Contradictory.
Uh-huh. Scott? Did you find that true? I put him on the spot, did I? Josh, what's your characteristic?
Right now, confused.
Oh. I don't know about myself. So from your interaction with me, Josh, how would you describe me? That's cheating, right? Put him on the spot.
Hey, I really don't know how to answer.
He didn't want to hurt my feelings, right?
No, it's not that. My mind is on the.
That's not fair. Well, what do you think?
Dynamic.
Kind. Sincere.
Knowledgeable.
Boy,
Generous.
Gentle.
boy, you guys are so kind.
Right.
Compassionate.
Adorable.
My husband said I'm spoiled. But I think I'm a happy person because I'm very thankful. And I just feel, what I am is not come what I do with it, what I build myself, and I think it just happened. Isn't that we feel sometimes like existential perspective? I did not ask to be born Chinese. I did not ask to be short. I did not ask to be, we were thrown into this world with no grounding, right? We were so, you don't even know where you're going until you look back and you see, oh my goodness, how fortunate I am compared with, what's happening in the world. So I think we all have that feelings of mystery. Why are we here? And to death. Psychological, social, emotional, and spiritual being. That's who we are. Isn't that mysterious, precious? And this is why, how do we use ourselves in the helping profession, the healing profession, to people who are just as complex as we are? Because we're made of the same stuff. So this is why I take counseling, psychotherapy very seriously. I was joking earlier, we have 4 lawyers in our family. The lawyers usually charge $300 to $400 an hour for consultation. And how much could psychotherapists charge? And so it's not for the money that we engage in this profession, is it? When we were invited to speak in Japan, Tokyo, at the last day, they asked if I would say anything. I told a group of people who were very, very serious, and very sincere, and I said, anybody who wants to make money, get out of here. Because in doing psychotherapy, you give so much of yourself to others. And sometimes you don't get any reward at all, monetarily. But what do we get? Satisfaction. We get joy. We just feel that we have done something, not just for myself, but for others and for society at large. And that's worthwhile, isn't it? So I think this course not only give you the skills and how you, learn about yourself and how to use, that's part of it, but also to develop who you are and make the best of yourself so that you can share with others. Other questions? And I think what we will do, I wanted to have more interaction, and I'm a person who wanted to hear from you rather than just lecture and give you on whatever is on the paper. So maybe we have known each other for 2 days now. So we'll divide into smaller groups in the afternoon so that your small groups could do some discussion and helping one another and grow together. Does that make sense? Okay, good. And I apologize for the ones online. You wouldn't have the opportunity to share, but hopefully you can, with Josh's help, you could ask questions and you could interact for the group that stays here. All right, let's continue with the cultural self. And last time we talked about collectivistic and individualistic society. What do you know about individualistic and collectivistic society? In general, what we're talking about, I forgot this thing does not work on this screen. Okay, collectivistic society usually refer to the Western society. And collectivistic, no? Okay. Individualistic society, it is the North Americans, right? With 4 hours sleep. Good thing. All right, and then the collectivistic is more, I wouldn't say Southeast Asian. I mean, we arbitrarily decide what kind of society we lived in? No. Steve, you tell me.
Well, I think we're born into society, that society has a culture, and that culture tends to form how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves as part of a group.
But why would we say that Western is more individualistic?
I think that's the way society developed. I mean, you know, even opening up the West historically was about quote unquote rugged individualism. It was about people, you know, man against nature, man against his environment, man against another man. It was always about the individual.
All right.
I think the rise of the individual really began with the Enlightenment, did it not? The Age of Reason. That's really when we began to see like the separation of self from the collective.
Mm-hmm.
Very capitalistic, with the emergence of capitalism, and the focus became much more individualistic. So it's about high context, low context cultures, which have been highly researched, right, and spoken about. And it can be also in a continuum. Even though Western, it's not homogeneous, individualistic, you can have Aboriginal people who live in a notion of collectivism.
Excellent. Now, what does that have to do with counseling? Rita?
How decisions are made, so for example, if you're seeing abused women, it's not very simplistic to say that the only option is to leave, even though you're supporting them, because they have a consideration of family, community, the whole society before they will make a decision and they've exhausted all resources for change.
In other words, individuals are encouraged to set goals in the individualistic society, but the other one would be to carry on as a group.
Yes.
You're part of the group.
Sorry, the question you asked us earlier about our view of self, or how we saw ourselves, or a word that described ourselves. I mean, for many of us, it's not just what we think of me, but it's also what do people, and that speaks to the collective or environment, like the people in our circle, what do they think of, and my sense of self comes from not just what I think, but from what my significant others they got them too, so.
You care about how people look at you, how people, yes. And you shape yourself according to the need in that society.
It's socially constructed, a lot of it, in terms of the experiences, etc.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. All right. We all talk about self, and we have so many different characteristics within. I'm not going to go through this. I don't have time. So basically, independent self-control would be you can be unique. You could express yourself the way you want it. You realize your own attribute. You promote your own goals, and be direct. Say what you have on your mind. On the other hand, you feel you need to belong. You want to fit in, and then you have engage in proper action so that promote others' goals. And so that was just one author. But I mean, just give you some ideas of differences of individuals, whether they place themselves in, okay, I am who I am. But if you are raised in a collectivistic society, and you can't afford to do that because everybody demands so much of you, right? And on the other hand, how could you develop your individual skills, strength, if you are completely, talk about other people's goals and behave the way that other people want you to behave? That's difficult, isn't it? So that's why we need to understand where people are coming from. And even in cognitive thinking, and we talk about black and white linear, we talked about that, and then in the ancient Asian or Oriental thinking is very different because you're together, right? Okay, this is what I like about John Barry's acculturation, and he's a professor at in Queens, and he's retired now. And he started, I think this is not a very good picture, so I added this one. Can you see this? No. Okay, I'll read it. Okay, people coming into, like we talked about last time, people are coming from another country into North America. And how many times that we see people having difficulties acculturating in the majority society, especially when family, the first generation immigrants. And let's talk about, for example, the Asian people come in. And the parents used to say, okay, we gave up our jobs, we gave up our comfort, our language, and everything else because we want you to have a better future, to the children. And so when they come to Canada, so they struggle. You have seen professors working in the laundry room, and you see people who are rich, they have to do something so that they could learn a little more about this culture. So what happened to the second generation? The children? At 3:30, you come home. You do your homework. You play your piano. Next day, you go to Taekwondo. And then, Wednesday, you go to Chinese school. And and you just occupy. But the kids will come home and say, Mom, could we go to play? All my friends are, on the football field and they're playing. Could we go to play? No, right? So it is very difficult for children to live in a home that is maintained, that is still the original culture, and educated in another culture, and then try to bring the two things together. That is not an easy job, is it? So, what John Barry was saying, okay, there are different groups. One, you have a choice. You want to maintain your culture of origin. And you reject Okay. You maintain your culture and identity, but you also want to relate among the other groups. In other words, there's two ways of doing it. You either maintain your own original culture, or you're going to be absorbed in the majority culture. But it's not so easy, is it? Not just say, well, I want to do this or I want to do that. So people, most of the time, would be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. There's nothing wrong with that, with it. So I always say, you bring part of your culture into the majority culture, the part that is good, right? And then you take, and that is what we do is called integration. You integrate part of your culture and then majority culture. Does it make sense? Yes.
Can I just share a little bit about like my personal experience with that? Because I feel like I'm kind of going through that process right now in my.
That's what I want. I'm just giving you stimuli so that I could get, some of your feedbacks.
Yeah, because so I've been living in Sarnia, which is a town of about 70,000 people. And I spent the majority of my high school and kind of developmental years in living in big cities. So living in Toronto, living in Vancouver. So living in these cities where everything is very quick and everyone kind of lives in that own kind of like individual bubble. And going to a small town where people where a lot of my colleagues have kind of been born and bred in the area, right? Raised. That's so good to me, and the idea that like everybody kind of knows them. So it's that integration piece that I'm kind of like experiencing right now in terms of being this really independent person and kind of living this life where you can control where you bump into people and how you bump into people or where you live and work. So in Toronto you can live on one side of the city and work in the other side of the city and have very different pieces of life, and in Sarnia it doesn't work like that. In small towns it's very much a blend, right? You live and you work and you bump into people, and so just kind of figuring out how to integrate into that different culture, that different way of living, that different where you go to church and you see somebody, and you go to work and you see someone, or you meet somebody, like just kind of how all those different parts of life overlap in just a different way. I don't know if I'm being clear at all, but that's kind of like my experience of that integration piece.
How do you feel about that?
It was really uncomfortable in the beginning, right? It was really like, I really had to kind of sit and take like an observation of what culture, and kind of take an inventory almost of what the culture of the city is and what the culture that I'm entering into is, and figure out kind of what you're speaking to, like the best way that I can enter into that culture in a way that is comfortable and safe, but
so you have to make a lot of adjustments.
Yes, yeah, a lot of adjustments, and still ongoing, right? It's still,
Of course.
It's only a year, so I feel like just in the last few months, I've been able to start
more comfortable in it, and you find yourself you do not betray yourself.
Yes.
And then you also absorb something from the other culture.
Yeah.
Yes, Noreen.
I also have experienced this being a convert to Islam, and having moved to a small community of 19,000. I'm the only Muslim person in the area, and talk about getting looks. However, trying to integrate my Islamic self with my past even, and people who've known me in my past, and even within my family, because I'm the only one who has converted to Islam, and everyone else is Catholic. So it makes it very difficult. And I've lost contact kind of with my brothers because of it. So it makes it very difficult to know who I'm supposed to be, where I am, and etc. Yeah.
Right. So this is what we were talking about. Yes, I want to maintain my heritage, and I also wanted to be part of the majority. So you integrate. That's what Deidre? Raidra. But some of the people say, okay, I have come from, Far East. I do not want my culture. I want this majority culture. I abandon my original identity, my culture, so you are assimilated into the majority culture. In other words, you're no longer Chinese, you are white, right? And so you're being absorbed, and you're being assimilated. But on the other hand, and you say, okay, now I wanted to maintain my culture, but I do not want anything to do with the majority culture. So you separate yourself from the majority. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And we see a lot of situations like that. Then you say, okay, I really don't want to continue with my old original culture, and then I also don't like this majority culture. So what would happen? You're marginalized. Where do I fit in? Right? And so, Deidre? Raidra, I'm sorry, I've got to think about the R. Yeah, you are integrated, right? Mm-hmm. And how would you describe yours?
I would say marginalized.
You just feel marginalized because you discover something new and you absorb into that.
Yes, I have absorbed into the Islamic culture somewhat. However, I'm not totally accepted because I am a convert, and there's some issues that happen there with those who are born Muslims versus converts. And I live outside of the major community, outside of Windsor. So I'm not really attached to any mosque. And so, and then I'm isolated at home because there's no other Muslims in the area.
How do you feel about that?
Very sad and lonely.
Sad and lonely.
Yeah.
See, this is the whole thing about, culture influences in our daily lives. As a professional, you will meet clients who are going through different stages of these 4 categories. In some areas, they say, okay, I'm going to separate from this and this and that. And yet there are pieces that they take in. There are pieces. And so it depends on your comfort zone, doesn't it? And you say, well, okay, there are areas that I think I can take it, take bits and pieces, and then hopefully you live, right? Yeah, you have a...
Oh, I was going to say, my son plays hockey, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're a black family. And when he's around people, after a while, I'm not exactly sure what the dominant culture really is. Because we all kind of, when I meet the families, they're all so similar in many ways. And then, you have people from different parts, different areas that do play hockey, So when we talk about dominant culture now, I'm not sure if it probably was more prominent when your family came. But now it's so diverse in Toronto, like I don't really know now when we say dominant what that really means.
And as we talk about, the society is changing constantly. Our lives are changing constantly. So this can never be say, this is it. But this is just give you an idea of at the particular time with this particular client and in their relationship with their family, and this is what's happening. And it is not carved on stone, and we all a little bit of this and a little bit of that. in different areas of life. And this, yes, Penny.
I think as well, when you're a psychotherapist or you're doing psychotherapy, you also are in a different cultural way of thinking. And I live in a town, and I call it a small town. It's 37,000 people, 3,700 people. And I go to and I visit small communities that have about maybe 1,500 to 1,000 people in those communities. And we also have in our standards of practice is no dual relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So when you live in a small community and you do bump into people at the grocery store, or and they may start to talk to you about things, and they may be your client, you have to really maintain very strict boundaries, and sometimes that can come off as that you're being standoffish or that you think you're different than other people. It's interesting because the doctors in our community are very down to earth, and they don't have those same set of rules like that we have, and they interact, they intermingle with their client, like their patients at parties and different functions, and so it puts you in a different situation when you walk into that, especially too if you come from an academic culture too. You're coming into a different environment of where not everybody has been trained or thinks that way.
Isn't that real? I live in a city of 70,000, and my husband and I will go grocery shopping on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The reason is if we go on Friday to Saturday, and somebody said, "Oh, here's so she's my counselor," you know, all that. And are you going to stop them from saying it or not? Right? And one time I was going down the aisle, and somebody just stopped me and said, "Oh yeah, we talk about that particular problem we had the last session. Well, I want to tell you the follow-up in the grocery store." So, I mean, it's great, but is that appropriate?
Not in the North American context, but if you are living in a high context community, yes, we have to ensure confidentiality. Above all, we have to talk about anonymity, because anonymity is a very big part of confidentiality. However, conversations happen in that kind of a community. So in the South Asian community in Brampton, Brampton is referred to as Sing Town, S-I-N-G-H. And you are going to bump into just about every one of your clients, right? And how do you conduct yourself? So I usually lay it out in the beginning. I'm not going to acknowledge you, and that's for these reasons. But if you do approach me, I will talk to you. But if you start talking about stuff that other people shouldn't hear, I'll tell you to stop. And if you really want to talk, then you have to go find a corner somewhere. Maybe it'll be the washroom. Okay, but generally speaking, it's not a community that identifies with North American norms of how we socialize emotions. So you have to really work in a very different way. They don't even want to come to counseling. Counseling is a bad thing. So you have to really do the work to make them understand the significance of counseling. And counseling is done all the time in high context cultures, because that's the role of elders, and we do it in a very different way.
What do you mean when you say high context cultures?
We are much more traditional. So, for example, you were asking example of a cultural, in the adaptation, adjustment, and integration process, the 3 steps. My mother-in-law used to tell me, they'd been living here for a very long time, that, you're going to have somebody tell you off, because I used to stand up every time an older person walked in, open the doors for them. And she said, one of these days, the same old lady is going to tell you to go away. And that, what do you think, I can't do it? because it was a clear clash of high context, which are traditional. We treat our elders in a very different way. And over here, it's much more individual. I can do it. Whereas I wouldn't sit till somebody older, one day older, sat down.
You see, this is why we need to know about ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to know how do we interact with people who are different from us. And also because we are a professional people, we get to know the secrets and the working of individuals. That's very privileged.
Yes.
And how do we keep our role in such a way that it will not offend and also would be ethical? And I think that is, I taught all the little kids, wherever, you've got to do the right thing ethically. Now, for example, if somebody, I always ask my, talk to the clients like this, like everything is confidential. And if you see me in the mall or something, and we could just say hello and acknowledge that I know each other, and this is not the time to talk, as you mentioned. And one time the little fellow saw me so excited, and they say, Mommy, Daddy, all this about meet my counselor. And what do you do, right? So that means that you have to go along with the person he or she feels comfortable by saying that, but very graciously and say, nice meeting you, no chats. Because you see what happened, they're so tempted, right? All of a sudden they don't have to get an appointment, and they could see you and say, oh, you know what we've done? And that kind of blurred the boundary. And I think the most important thing is that we have to be responsible to keep confidentiality, and we have to do whatever we can to be who we are. We are helpers. We are not going to be restricted with a white coat. But then there are ways that we have to learn how to deal with ourselves and how to relate to other people. And that's very, be who you are, but remember, do the right thing. And I just brought this up quickly just to kind of get you thinking about the acculturation process. And some people continue to isolate themselves, and some people wanted to be part of. And that's where the family conflicts sometimes come in. You see, the children want to be assimilated, but the parents wanted to have isolation or separation. So it is hard within a family, within 3 generations, then you cannot help it but have conflicts and problems. And that will come to your office. So we need to understand where they are coming from. This is very general, and I'm not sure that I agree with that. You say Asians are less likely to employ direct coping strategy. Do you find that? Oh yeah, Laurie?
That's half of my work at the hospital on the crisis team.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
The simplest of situations, they think they need a psychiatrist if they're upset about something. They just don't know how to cope with that, don't have much in the way of coping skills, a lot of people. Obviously not everyone, but it's like they panic about it, and their first line is to go to the emergency. That's where they end up. Did you talk to your family doctor? No, no, that never occurred to me to do that.
I've got 2 hands. Oh, okay.
I'm working in a youth justice system, and I find the kids similarly as well believe that, like with everything, instead of seeing your social worker or maybe for risk assessment that's done by the psychologist, the family is always insisting, oh, they need to see the psychiatrist. So in that way, it's like they feel they have to see somebody who can, well, I don't know if the psychiatrist is just the term that they feel that's the only person who can fix their situation, but usually they are not very accepting of having just seeing a counselor, a therapist, and a psychologist. They have to see somebody they feel is higher, to fix that. That could just be a talk issue.
So it's more, they like to see a doctor rather than a psychologist.
Right.
And therefore, so often, if you think they need a psychologist, you work through the doctor.
Right.
And if the doctor refers, they are more likely to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they like to stay home because they wanted to find, they say, well, okay, I can manage it, I don't need to go. And that was very hard. But Asians are coming out more now. And they also bring children is the reason they say, I come because of the children's problem. That's okay. Because when they open the door, then they are willing to open themselves. But you have to be trustworthy. You must create an environment that is safe for them. And okay, we have a lot to cover. Coping strategies are viewed as dysfunctional because of the use of coping as denial, withdrawal, avoiding confrontation, controlling feelings, having a, like there's a lot of kind of a broad concept, but I think we were talking about individuals too. Yes, you have.
I was just going to say that we work in a very large multicultural post-secondary educational environment, and every year the faculty have training on cross-cultural issues because they invite students. At higher education, you have a different relationship with your faculty, first names, you can go to their office, and the faculty say that it is very difficult. They encourage the students to come see them. Let me know if you have a problem, we'll talk about it. And they notice that Asian students, don't do that. They don't see them in their office, they don't stop the faculty and say, oh, can we talk for a minute? They stay very much insular around that. They don't interact with the faculty as much.
Why? What makes them that way?
Because they're private, they tend to just believe that families, that's what one kind shared with me, that families work things out together. You do it in a family, you don't need external people to come in, it's private, right? And if you can fix it, then I don't need to see a therapist.
Yeah. They find all the outsiders are intrusive.
Right.
We know what we need.
Yeah.
And we need to be together.
Right.
Now, can you see what's the danger of that? Holly?
Yeah, I'm currently working with someone who she came in because they're having problems in their marriage and he's quite emotionally abusive and I'm seeing the escalation kind of go up in terms of, just what he's doing in the relationship. And it was a big risk for her to come in, and she wants him to get counseling because she's, feeling some benefits there, but he's resistant, and so there's just a real conflict because he's feeling, no, we don't need to air our concerns and all of our stuff to other people, and he wants to keep it private, but she's at a situation where if it escalates further, it could very much end the relationship and move on, and how she views kind of possible shelter services or this sort of thing, because it's just so against her cultural belief system, yet she's recognizing that she does need the support. So it's a real conflict for her, in terms of that. But I think it's, very brave that she's reaching out.
That's pretty typical, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not going to hang our dirty laundry outside.
Yeah.
Whatever we have, we deal within ourselves. So they shortchange themselves to get the help that they can, resolve. But how would you deal with that? Yes.
Well, you had mentioned something about what are some of the issues that would arise. I guess one thing that came up for me was that oftentimes families who are going through difficult struggles, they hide the situation, and then there's a development of shame. Like there's a certain amount of shame, and that they place that shame on themselves, and if that becomes part of their development, as opposed to dealing with those problems and learning that some of the things that they're going through is normal, and that they can grow out of that and heal.
Shame is
Compassionate towards themselves.
big time. I have hands. Yes, Toby.
This piece is kind of going back to the previous slide, the diagram, and with the kind of concept that people have multiple different identities, and it's not just their heritage or their family origin background, and so the complexity of in that kind of circle of where you're going to be is, so for example, if we're talking about sexual or gender identity, the family isn't necessarily going to have that background or understanding. It's not a place that you necessarily go, and it depends what you're seeing as that kind of queer culture. Is that reflecting your also other cultural identity? And so I think it can be so much more complex than these different pieces, right?
Exactly.
And it's the complexity also in terms of power of some parts of your identity might be what you were describing as like the dominant culture, or that has more kind of systemic kind of power, and other parts that don't. And so it can be so, yeah, it just feels like it's a lot more kind of.
Very, very much so, as we talk about how complex our human beings are, and with all these complex components and make into a society, can you imagine how many times more complex it gets? But there's part of us feel comfortable with certain things, and part of us not comfortable with others. But that's normal, right? If we understand ourselves, then we could understand our clients. And this is why if we won't dare to go to those closets and explain ourselves and kind of feeling comfortable with ourselves, then how can we help someone or even have insight into the closets of our clients? And this is why I thought this is a good way of talking together and explaining. It's so complex we cannot just draw a diagram and say, haha, this is it. But at least a framework is important. A framework will guide things into right places. Yes.
I think the other dimension now that further complicates it, certainly in my world, is the online community and culture and relationships that the students are really distressed about, that is really difficult, because I grew up without computers. So understanding the intensity of the virtual communities and the relationships, even though they haven't done face-to-face, is something I've also had to kind of get my head around, as it's a very real global community used for many things, but very important to the student.
We almost have a different generation and a generation gap. And if we do not participate and to understand the new generation, our gap will get larger and larger. So my brother-in-law said, I don't use computer. I don't use iPhone. I don't say. I said, okay, fine. Now, guess what he has? He has an iPad, he has an iPhone. He can't live without it, right? So the generation is pushing us into cyberspace. And this is why we invited Josh here to help us to develop and move us forward. And I think this is important because you're going to be dealing with clients from all ages. And I go to Apple Store every week or every other week for my one-to-one. And I got 3 favorite coaches. So they teach me how to do things. And guess what I see? Little kids on the round table. They go tap, 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 and they were all communicating with each other, playing games and happy.
And the grandparents look around and say, well, I can't, entertain these guys. They entertain themselves. So our generation is changing. So not only age gaps, and it is generation gaps, cultural gaps, and we have a lot of differences, and we need
I guess that like only like Asian cultures are showing more of a proclivity towards this type of thing, but that seems to be from the cultural standpoint where they're releasing this or focusing the attention on it. They seem to be focusing on that cultural group. We're going to expand, far wider not to many other cultures as well, but it's going to become really, very real to deal with and grapple with in the next 10, 20 years. Like as people, as they become more normative in society, like I'm having a relationship with this robot basically, right? So it's like the next frontier of evolution, maybe human evolution, I don't know, or artificial intelligence and all that. But I'm just wondering, like, where this kind of fits into thinking of the psychotherapeutic world and technology, being kind of like it's here now. It's not a science fiction thing anymore, right? So to your point about what kids are dealing with on campuses,
they have an
the virtual
identity
world
out there in a community, and they are also expecting us to have a virtual therapy. And they want us to do an awful lot of discussion online, and because that is their culture to do that. And they're disclosing all kinds of things all over the world, but the pressure is on, and so the debate goes on, certainly between us all in terms of e-counseling or not e-counseling, and so it's affecting us all,
Didn't Stephen Hawking just do a lecture via hologram or something? That's where he, yeah. So, I mean, it's like, okay, this is really coming in terms of, it's interesting as Scott was talking, I remember saying to my dad, well, way back when, because he was saying, go into computers, it's, you're going to make a lot of money and, blah, blah, blah. And this was like, they were just, hitting the scene, if you will. And I was in high school and I went, that doesn't interest me, I want to work with people. And then he said, yeah, but computers are going to be progressive. I said, yeah, but a computer will never replace a counselor. Well, that wasn't, because, then we were, there was no mobile phone, there was no anything.
And now there's Siri.
And now there's like,
ask Siri what's going on in the car.
Yeah.
Call Siri. Is the Siri a friend?
Yeah, like you can ask her questions. Oh, hi Siri, good morning, Holly. It's like, oh, this is just
adorable.
And so it's I think in terms of counseling and what the youth will expect, and maybe even the older generation, I don't know, but I think it is coming, and it's inevitable.
When Scott mentioned that, the first thing, the word that popped out in my head was surrogate.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But could robots actually replace human beings?
Yeah, there was that movie, what was the movie called?
Bruce Willis.
Yeah, you actually could just sit in your house all day, but you would send your, what do they call them? Your surrogate, or they were called something now.
Is it an avatar?
Yeah, the avatar. Yeah, it was like, so you just send them, so you create them, and then they actually go out and live your life in society. It's like, oh my God, that's
I do not know the future. But I do know that nobody in this world can create a real human being with a soul.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. Okay? But we could produce surrogates in certain areas that help people to overcome some of the difficulties that they wanted to do. Okay, the robots can do the teaching. I mean, I'm sure when I program all this stuff here, the robot could stand up here, do a much better presentation than I am doing now. But then the robot will have difficulties understanding why sometimes I hesitate. Because I am a human being, I'm looking at the different angles of the different presentations here. Then I'm thinking and say, okay, where should we go so that the whole group will benefit? You see? On the one-to-one, it's so much easier. But when you have clients and coming together as a family, and that is not that easy. So therefore, I would say in the near future, nobody's going to replace a warm-blooded psychotherapist. Okay, so let's train well. And I think I overstepped 5 minutes, right?
Just wanted to add one point. Technology is about comfort, and life isn't always comfortable. And I mean, that's what we deal with, right? We deal with the discomfort. So, I mean, I don't think, a technology that's oriented around making somebody comfortable is actually helping them develop themselves as a person. Or, using computer personality development. I mean, that's something that's missing in technology, right?
Yeah. But on the other hand, it does allow us to meet needs that we may be too shy or too anxious to meet face to face. So it allows us to extend ourselves. It's how we use it. It doesn't use us, it's how we use it.
Yes.
I work, so I work in an area where there can be a lot of weather conditions, and so I can't always get to a community to do the work that I do. So we use Ontario Health Network, which is on television, right? We're face to face, but it's a TV, right?
Yeah, yes.
We also use sometimes Skype, and we also use telephone sessions. But because of the professionalism that I carry, I have to say to them that there's going to have to come a point in time when we meet face to face.
Exactly.
I have to see you face to face, so I can assess you differently. And there is that difference. There's a lag always in the communication. That person can be upset on the phone, but you're not seeing them. Mm-hmm, and that's, I think, a really important piece in the work.
Right, right.
So I guess in my professionalism, I always encourage people. Let's try and see each other face to face to have that connection.
I have experience counseling over, not FaceTime, but Skype, and it's from here to Calgary. So why don't you find somebody from Calgary? No, I want you. So, and it was very strange in the beginning, and then it started to warm up. And so then you could have telephones. The only thing is the blackout. Sometimes, it just didn't come through, and the voice was set down depending on the transmission. But it worked. But I still much prefer to have face-to-face. And even though a mixed mode would be good. And we will have lots to talk about and lots of time to talk about, but we'll cover some of the materials. And it is break time, so enjoy your break and stretch. And please, there are 3 bathrooms, one on top, one at the bottom, and one on this floor.
How long is the break?
15 minutes.
Is that, can you tell me?
Oh, yes. The break is 15 minutes. I'm going to ring the bell. Are you refreshed?
They're so busy, like, it's so
Any changes will take a lot of time
Social. And now it's like.
Dark day, okay. I'm watching the fights tonight, so that might get a little rowdy. Yeah, everybody's doing
All right.
That's good. Oh, Mayweather. I'm so pumped. You have no idea.
Yeah, you're going to see it?
I'm going for it. I'm really going to fight. That's it. I don't care who wins. It's gonna be good.
But even when it's
You didn't get a chance for your snack? Oh, okay, good, good.
So, I think it might be
I got a long way.
Oh, yeah. As we talked about earlier. Huh? I know.
Should be in the bed.
As we talked about earlier, not everybody wants to get counseling because they feel that it's a shame or uncomfortable talking about difficult things. But what was another most important thing for not wanting to get help? Anybody?
They're afraid to disclose. Yes. And they're afraid of judgment. They don't want to be judged. They have a problem to open up. And there is the fear of somebody may not understand them and or simply judge them.
Maybe the fear of getting better.
You know what? A lot of times they don't think there was a problem
That's true.
because they were immersed in that situation. And that's the way life is.
Becomes their normal.
Yes, it is normal. And, you know, like the problem with abuse, and that's, well, that is life, and that's normal, and I can deal with it. I'll take it. So what would happen if they take that stand? I have a family with 2 young girls, and the girls at school were isolated. They were bright, bright children. And also, they don't participate in any activities. They have no social life. And in class, they do not contribute. And so they could be identified as ADHD because their minds were not there. And when they went out there, they would not associate with anybody except for their cousin or their sister. So when the parents went to see the teacher and said, well, you know, they are not functioning, so they spent big bucks getting diagnosis and all the reports, about 40 pages for the two of them. And then what do I see is not the individual children, but what kind of environment were they raised. So then I found out, that one child, 3 nights, stayed with the grandparents, and 3 nights stayed with mom and dad. And then the younger child stayed at home. And so you see the situation is very different. And the mother worked double time, had no time to do a lot of relating to the girls. And then also the father's busy. So in a situation like this, they don't think they had a problem, but they do. They know that they're not comfortable. They're not relating. They're not communicating. In a situation like this, where do you begin? Where do you begin?
With the parents.
Hmm?
With parents. The most, because if this is the situation, the influence of parents when it comes to the children. So the parents is the...
We provide them with a secure home. They have meals regularly. They were delivered to school probably every day. What's wrong? I'm busy making money so that they have good clothing, they have good meals, they go to, music lessons. What's wrong? We both are hardworking couple.
So perhaps psychoeducational, like share with parents what children do need in terms of nurturing or connection, attachment. Yeah, I think.
And I'm home a lot of times. Right? I work at home too, but they are here, and they got grandparents to look after them too.
Do they spend time with their children?
Well,
One-on-one.
well, they don't need me. They play with each other and the cousin.
But there is the emotional aspect. There's the emotions. So they probably not aware of how big impact is from the emotional point of view, the interaction parent-child.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm getting close to them, but I don't know anything about school. And I could get them a tutor.
But you cannot tutor emotions and love and care. You cannot tutor this.
How much more can you ask of me? They're well provided for.
So can I just ask a clarification question? So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the situation. So the children at school are just not engaging with other children.
That's right.
Okay. So okay. I have to keep thinking because I don't know if it has to do with the home so much as what it's like. How are the children? I guess I'm curious as to understand the kids' experience at school.
The social experience.
Like that social experience at school, because maybe home is very safe and very nurturing and very caring and they're fed and things, but maybe there's something going on in the school that
the teacher tried to pair them up and give them, relationship with another child and activities to do, but they just isolate themselves and they just kind of sit there.
Sounds like they're having a lot of interaction with adults also instead of children.
Hmm?
They're having more interaction with adults as opposed to with children?
No, they stay by themselves.
How old are they?
And about 6, about 10.
Maybe they just don't know how. I mean, they don't have any friends at home, do they?
That's what I'm saying, interaction with adults and not with children.
Yeah, you're right. They don't know how. Now, where did they get that knowledge? How do they do it? I mean, how would you advise the mom or the dad?
Relationship, it's about building relationship with them outside of being a parent. Understanding their thoughts, their feelings. You know, it's not about providing for the physical. It's about playing with them, watching a movie with them, cuddling, going into their rooms, whether individually, collectively, just being there with them, talk to them, hear their frustrations when there's nobody at school to play with, when they're just annoyed at a teacher or at a...
So you are asking the mother to do all that?
No, they have to create opportunities for them to relate to kids their own age as well, right?
Right.
Outside of school.
Well, mom would say, I took them to Sunday school, and they don't relate.
Allow them to bring kids home.
Oh, that's impossible because we're so busy.
Yeah, they need that.
Well, we need to pay for mortgage, we need to pay money, and then we pay for music lessons.
Do the parents even know?
So I think my question to you then, Ms. Lilian, would be, okay, fair enough, but what do you think you would be able to give considering that this is a situation? Because everything I'm saying so far doesn't seem to work. Is there?
I was brought up the same way.
Right. So that's the relation, right? You don't know how to teach kids social skills, say, because you never learned it, and that could be a real issue.
And I survived.
Of course. Different.
So then, in that case, do the parents even see how their children engage in the school as a problem? If they look at it as, well, that's how I was raised, do they even see that behavior? The school might see it as problematic because that's the culture of that might be the majority culture, right? Like, the assumption is when you're at school, you interact with everybody, but if the parents don't see that as a problem, you're going to be beating up against, like, and you're working with the parents, you're never going to be able to engage the parents. The parents are like, that's not a problem, that's how they are, that's how I was raised, that's how my parents were raised, and it's that cultural piece, so it's...
See, a lot of times they don't go for help because they don't know there is a problem. That's the way they were raised, and therefore, what's wrong? So how do you make them realize that children need more than, and how, society has changed, they need to be more relational, they need to feel more comfortable with themselves. And you know what some of the kids would do? Computer games, all day, all night. Or reading, imagining, so then they are relating. Now, is there anything wrong with that?
Not all day. I mean, there's nothing wrong with reading, and there's nothing wrong with playing computer games, but not necessarily.
That is the only thing I will do from morning till night, is reading those books or playing games. And
I feel like right now, like I'm kind of imposing my ideas onto somebody else. Like, if a parent is that way, then that's the way they are. And if problems are at school, then I would think that the solution would be to deal with some of those issues in the school environment as best you can. I wouldn't want to impose those are my ideas, like that children need to have a lot of.
What about like adaptive behavior and focusing on that, and are they learning enough adaptation skills? Are you capable of, if they're not learning it from school, are you capable of teaching them so that you're preparing them for success in life?
how do we overcome the reluctance to utilize counseling and mental health services? There are many of those out there. I was fortunate to get hold of that family or other families, similar families, because the school started to question about the mental health, social skills, and production, academic productions of the children. When schools started to question, the schools started to demand, then parents started to move. When they come to you, we are fine. It's only the school that got the problem, right? So how do you deal with that? You don't know the background. You just got the referral because the kids are not productive, the kids are not socializing, because the school required the children to get some counseling. Okay? It's not what we're concerned, we're fine.
Mm-hmm. So I think, obviously, you have to start the assessment. Just to assess the whole situation, assess the family dynamics, assess the cultural, norms within that family, and trying to understand, why is it okay? So you talked about some of that coming from generations and whatnot. We are okay. We're doing all we can. So and then I think the step 2 would be some kind of psychoeducation, because if we're going to look at, well, we're biased, psychosocial beings, and yeah, fine, biologically they may be okay in your eyes, psychologically you think that you're providing for them spiritual, but this is also an aspect of their health that's also critical. So maybe it has to start with educating them about this big picture, and hope that they will, see that it's not just a school problem, and potential consequences if it remains that way.
Mm-hmm. So how do you use yourself to inject yourself into that situation?
Unfortunately, I would have to say that for me, I would have to refer. I work with 16 and up, so I would have to refer them to the Algoma Family Services, which has a program called Strengthening and Building Healthy Families. So they could go to a psychoeducational workshop or class and learn about that with other parents, and they have dinners together, and they work with the kids, spend time with the kids, and they spend time with the parents.
So you recommend some agency, some program that they can go and participate?
That would be away from school.
Away from school, including the parents?
Yeah, the parents are included.
And the parents said, we don't do things together.
With each other, the parents.
Isn't that a hint?
Yeah, it is.
I think, all of those things have gone through my mind. Plus, if the reason for this family coming and opening up to some extent is school,
yes,
probing what's important to the parents and what do they want for their children, because it sounds like for the family it's important that the kids do well at school. Yeah. And so I'd also, referring is a great one, but for Toronto, the waiting list for stuff is about a year, I think. Mm-hmm. So, looking for what could I connect with the family that's important to them for the kids.
Okay, let me see, I have 4 hands up. Okay, let's take it in order. Okay, just brief and to the point.
Very briefly, I think if you already recognize the resistance or reluctance to share, whether it's cultural or otherwise, everything becomes cultural in some ways, is to validate the discomfort, is to acknowledge the difficulty in hearing that they could be doing something wrong. It's really to go from a strength-based approach as opposed to something is wrong with you. Maybe a disclosure by yourself saying that, you know what, I was also brought up this way, but I had to change my ways. What did I do with my children for their own betterment? Because I want my children to have a better life than I did. So it could be a combination of validating, strength-based approach, and a disclosure. I've been through this, or I have seen this kind of thing.
Good, yes. Rydra.
Yeah,
Now I got it right.
sorry. So I think part of that discomfort is that the school is telling this family to come in, right? To say, well, you need, like, they're getting kind of this external demand put on them to go in and seek help, which might be culturally discomforting for them, or it might just be discomforting to be told by somebody, well, you need to go seek help, right? So I would try to figure out how to align, not get in between like the school and the child, but try and be like, so this is what the school is wanting you to do, and sort of engaging the client in a way to, how do we work with you to kind of get the school out of the picture again, right? So if they want this, what do we need to start showing the school to show that it's working? Am I being clear? Like, it's sort of trying to meet in the middle.
Okay, one more, and then I'll.
So I just wanted to piggyback what Renee was saying around what's important to the family, because sometimes, you know, when we talk through their lens, it's easier for them to say, okay, so for example, I had a client the other day, I need to get her to the hospital, and whatever I was saying for some reason wasn't working, and I'm like, hold on for a minute, you know, your boyfriend would want, you know what I mean? Because her boyfriend was, you know, that's all she saw. So to go back from where they see it, say, you know what, this is important to you, I can appreciate that, but let's look at what's happening. In this area, this is working, but this might not be working. So, you know, see that education is important. How can we work on that together? I don't know, just an idea.
Okay, Sharon.
Just back to the cultural differences, and you know, the Western culture is more individualistic, and it's important. And then also the multicultural, what you said before, is it's more like a collective whole. So it's interesting is this culture is trying to come into a Western culture where it's back to the individualistic, study hard, get good grades, just do well, worry about your career, and this is what they have for their child. It's not, the social part is not important to them, possibly. I mean, maybe it is, but this might be a family where it is, and it's all about advancing your career and preparing your child to get ready for that. So it doesn't matter if they don't have friends or they don't play. So back to the collective whole is, then you might have to relate to the family to that. If it's important, it may not be important.
It's education integrating what is for culture is how here try for
you know, slowly.
Right? What is another one? Somebody? Where do we proceed from there, Patty?
Well, depending on if they're willing to do this or not. But I think that some people had mentioned that the parents don't do any interaction together. So it may be important for the parents to maybe think about what it is that they could do to get together and what then could they maybe do with their kids together.
So that is
Like modeling.
So, yeah.
reality, isn't it?
It's the baby steps of doing that.
It has to be baby steps. It has to find an opening.
Yeah.
Well, where the self-disclosure, now Rita mentioned a little bit. Now in this plan, where would you place yourself? How would you use yourself? I do not have kids who do not want to play. My kid is so social, so I don't think I could do that. And I don't farm my kids out in different households, so I cannot disclose because I have nothing to disclose.
I'm an immigrant, but.
What do I use as a tool in counseling in this situation?
You need to learn. I think it's okay to tell people, can you help me understand? Because I'm validating and recognizing that we have differences and I'm interested.
And that's what go back to our first lesson. You have to be honest and transparent and not have a chip on the shoulder and say, oh my gosh, I don't know, but I could imagine what it would be like. You wouldn't be real, would you?
No.
You have to be saying, oh, this is the first time I heard about this. Or you say, well, I really wish I can be in your shoe. Can you help me to put myself in your shoe? What might be the most difficult obstacle that I have to overcome or anything that I need to understand? Right? So what you are doing, you're hooking the mom into more. It's easy to work with kids, right? Kids are so, innately they want to play. Innately they want to relate. Innately what they want to grow. They want to learn more things. They want to be interacting with their environment. But what is preventing them from doing this? Is the structure of the family, isn't it? So this is a very unusual cultural background for these kids to be growing up in. You got love, you got care, you got all the basic needs met. But what's missing, as you all mentioned, is the emotional stability, discovery of self, relational, skills. All they know is in the box.
I think that the piece that you just mentioned about just being honest and transparent is critical because in building, trust in the relationship, because if they continue to see you as somebody who is telling them they're doing something wrong or approaching them as if, hey, this is the right way and you're going wrong, it's gonna be defeating the whole counseling process. So I think just being that transparent with them and as you rightly said, pulling them in and helping them to understand that, yeah, I don't get it. You're helping me to get it so we can work together. So stressing the collaborative approach, right, in that relationship. I think that's the only way you're going to reach them anyway.
So the open door was the school requires counseling. Thank the schools for that. And then you have to be able to navigate in an area that is least resistant, right? So what is the least resistance? Is helping the kids to succeed so that they don't get all these notes from teachers, phone calls, from the guidance and everything else, right? So it is so important to have opening and to say, okay, I don't know very much about what's going on, but I need your support. And your support is very important, you see? So you have to be open and you have to be smart enough to look at which area. You might have to bump into a couple openings, but they might be blocked, but find the least resistance and to say, they like that, let's pursue, right? Yes.
If I can just comment, because as everyone was kind of speaking, and thinking about what it would be like to get that referral from the school and saying, to hear, children don't socialize, however they sum it up. And I was thinking, maybe looking at that referral and being more curious about it, opposed to saying, well, what's the problem with this? Or looking at the behavior as problematic, and just being like, in that openness of being like curious about what is it, and wanting to understand more, opposed to saying that behavior is problematic or wrong, because if the school hadn't required it, that family wouldn't have identified that as an issue in that present sense, right?
So you go from, instead of saying, oh, poor children, or you didn't do well, you always, like Rita said, we go for the positives. It was a good thing that they refer. And can you imagine what it's like when the kids go to 13, 14 adolescence, and it will be too late, wouldn't it? Yeah. And also we say, well, I don't know what I can do, but I do my very best. And here it says, you see, the tension, mistrust. Well, let's talk about, you have to be very sensitive to know where they're coming from. You could ask a little bit about the background if they want to tell you. See, never impose yourself, because some of the people are just not quite ready to tell you the truth. So you say, well, is there anything you can tell me that might help me understand what that problem, stemmed from? Okay, so then, what do you think of that? Disclosing credentials to establish authority.
In this case?
Yes.
No. I'd be wanting to empower the mom or the dad.
You don't want to say, I'm a Ph.D. in child psychology, right? And then you're the expert, so you fix them, right? When people refer children, the first thing they say, you fix them. Yes.
Certainly, and sometimes too, what these parents are doing, they think that's love for their kids. Like I took my son to the tutor one day, right? And he was leaving, and then she says to me, "Oh, he needs some love." And I got a little defensive because here's this only kid that gets every single thing. So as you're talking, I think to myself, hold on for a second. That's no different than when I felt defensive that when that lady said to me, he needs some love. Lady, I give this kid everything. He's an only child. What more could he want?
Too much of a good thing.
So for me, if I were that parent, I would think, oh my God, like, what else am I
You
not
see,
doing,
this
you
is
know?
why when we talk about love, it's a global sense and abstract love, you know? And how do you translate love in the context so that the recipients realize that was love, right? And I just last night I told Paul, I said, you know what? You used to use a lot of love language and written in letters. I got a whole box of them. And I said, now I guess you express your love in actions. And he said, you're going to embarrass me and you are going And he also demands that. I said, well, you subtly, right? I mean, love manifested in so many different ways. But you see, only in class, out of class, at night, before she leaves the school. Then I said, okay, what book are you reading right now? What are the themes? Well, she said, you know what? As the princess in the book, it's very different from reality, you know. I mean, as a therapist, you try to find ways and means to enter. You got to be a good listener. You got to not only listen. You see, when you are listening, you know, can you see somebody when you say, tell me about your life, and they talk to you, and your eyes go like this, and wondering if your iPhone have a beep, you know, like you're not focusing. But when you listen, your mind goes a minute and says, how does all this represent the person? In what way? In what area needs correction? In what area needs to encourage and needs growth? And this is what we're talking about. Looking at the positives, looking at the other side that might need some corrections, and then draw a little plan. You can even write, I like to write notes on. They don't mind me doing that. I ask them, do you mind if I write some notes? They say, not at all. And I mean, you talk and you write a little bit, then in your mind you formulate. And you say, haha, this is a positive way to be entered. And they got all excited. But one of the things that I told parents is that I don't work with children alone unless I have the support of the parents. The reason is they could be as good as gold in my office, but when they get home, they would be hell on legs, right? So therefore, I said, you go. But when mother comes in, you already hear so much from the kids what the problems were in the larger family circle, right? And then you started to work layer by layer. Okay, you got the kids. The kids behaving. Now, one thing I always find that at the end of a session, you got to have 1 or 2 points. I don't like homework. For older people even, they homework, if they don't finish the homework, they come in, they feel guilty. I didn't have time to do your homework, you know, and it's okay, you know. I don't need any more marking to do. So anyways, I said it's for you and I want you to practice. But for kids, for younger people, you give them 2 things. I want you to practice this and this and that. Next week, you come back and see how you feel about it. So you know what that is? They remember what they experienced in your session. They learn something that you summarize. You see, during the session, there were so many things going on, right? For the first time, they open their minds and they talk about the things that they never told anybody else. But at the end of the day, what did you want them to carry and learn and practice? So that is very important. So when you get the things, you drill on them, write it on your notes, you can follow through it. And now, this time, last time when mom says something, you fight. This time, what would you do? And you just smile and say, yes, mom, I'm sorry. Something like that, depending on the situation. And something that they have learned positively, you go, well, okay, you don't like to make beds. Just say 5 days and see if you could do that, but not just activity, but the way they think, the way they relate to people, and the way that they don't depend, and correct some of the things. And what do you get after 2 or 3 sessions? When you see mom again, they changed. Oh, they changed. Have you changed? Right? Because change is not just in isolation. One changes, you move into next, right? And you improve and you go continuous to reach a goal. So I usually tell the mom, they say, I think at this point, our goal is such and such. Do you agree? And they agree on the goal. I said, they're as good as gold here, but I want you to support that. Instead of criticizing them every time and give them a scolding, just say, that's good work. Good job. Then when they come back, then we could build on it. You see, so we are doing psychoeducational lessons with the mom. And then she started to get comfortable with you. And you said, you know what, I might want to have a few sessions with you. And then you say, that might be a good idea. And then gradually say, during those sessions, I might be able to bring my husband in. And then on the side, the grandfather said, is that okay that my wife and I could come have a session with you? Sure. And you say, all these are confidential. I wouldn't tell anybody who came when you didn't, right? So this is how you started with yourself. Try to understand and not having all these big terms and plans, but you have to enter into the world of the other person and see if you could navigate and try to see with your expertise, with your experiences, and with your theory, and you can help. And how does a therapist hope to achieve by self-disclosing? And I think we talk about that a whole lot. Do you want to add anything? Okay, let's move forward. This what I will end in 10 minutes. Now, you can go to the American Psychological Association website, and they have guidelines for multicultural practice. Now, I'm not going to read all, I think they have 13 of them. Multicultural principle in psychotherapy, strategies to increase cultural awareness and knowledge. Challenge us and them perspective and change into we. We talked about that last time, didn't we? And then expand your cultural horizon, and I think this is very important. Read cross-cultural and ethnic literature, especially memoir, watch foreign ethnic films, learn a foreign language, travel to other cities, other countries, or culturally different areas in the United States. So in other words, you are required to learn about the multicultural principles in psychotherapy. And let me see, don't have time to do that. Unpack your invisible and unacknowledged average of privilege. Remember I told them earlier when I introduced myself, I feel I am privileged because I did not suffer a whole bunch, that other people have. But then that doesn't mean that I could be a brat, right? So you all have to think about if we are privileged, then we should be very thankful and we could share whatever we can. And also identify yours and your client's cultural identity development stages. Because as somebody mentioned, when you first got here, you just so overwhelmed with the indigenous or in the majority culture, and you bring in some of your cultures, you feel discomfort. But then you started to grow into it and never stop. That is a process. And as Noreen was saying, sometimes, you could find yourself isolated in certain areas, but you could still develop some skills within your area that you could help other people who experience the same isolation. And I think as a therapist, we should be flexible and we should really be willing to change. We are in the business of changing environment, changing ourselves, and changing others, and changing society, right? Our job is to change. And also, conduct a critical power differential analysis. What does that mean? That applies to supervisor and supervisee, doesn't it? Earlier, I was talking to someone. My research and my specialties is in supervision, clinical supervision and training. And we have a section in Division 17, Counseling Psychology. And when I was doing my dissertation on that, I remember one of my students went out for an internship. And he said, when I'm out there, I'm expected to be white, to be Canadian. But when I go home, I'm a Japanese. And it's so hard, to mash the two together. And as a supervisor, what do you want to be? Yourself, what would you be comfortable with? It's great because when he has Japanese clients, he understands them, he's more efficient than anybody else. But when he's in internship, the supervisor will say, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, he get low marks. You see? So this is why it is, you talk about power differential. Your supervisor will judge your performance based on the supervisor's perspective. And therefore, we are pushing for supervisors to learn multicultural skills and multicultural approach to supervision. And some of you are supervisors, and got to take heed how to use yourself in supervision. And that's big time, because these supervisees is going to be psychotherapists. And if you behave like a bully, they're not going to get what they need. And if you ignore them, and they're not going to get your benefit. And if you keep on disclosing because of your own personal difficulties, and the supervisees suffer. So this is why it is so important that as a supervisor, you have to check yourself. Okay, how many people use genograms? Do you use genograms in any of the family counseling? Do you know what a genogram is?
Yes.
Yeah, and you don't use them. Do you think there might be benefit in genogram? Genogram is that somebody explain it.
It's like a family tree. Well, I use it I have used it for teenagers so that I can get a better sense of, the family, the cultural, where if they have moved around a little bit. No.
I just happened to have one. I just happened.
Okay. Teresa, would you like to? I'm imposing on her. Yeah. Would you explain what?
How about
Teresa, can you go for the camera, please?
Yeah.
Oh,
just simply just say what genograms are.
It's a visual way of understanding the family dynamic. This one is a 3 generation. it has the start from, these are the grandchildren, these are the kids, these are the parents, and these are the grandparents. So there are various ways of doing it. For myself, I find it gives me a global understanding of the family dynamic in a very short way. And also, they can disclose as much as they want or as little as they want. Yeah. And then we're doing it together. And that also helped me to build a relationship with them. Yeah. For the younger, actually for mostly all ages, I actually let them choose a color to mark those square. Then they own it. Anytime they pick up something to engage on to this, they own the material. To me, it's an efficient way of getting information.
And for us who wants to sort of communicate with teenagers or tech-savvy people, there is a program on an app that the teenagers really, really love. So when I used to work in high schools, it's like, can I work on that Genogram today? So they add on to it, and I forgot to add that in last week. So that's sort of a common platform.
Yeah, for those who are not familiar with the genogram, and you just have a square for males and then a circle for females, and then how are they related? If they are divorced, and then you could have a symbol to say they're gone, or they would, if they are deceased, and then you do have a symbol. In other words, you see the whole picture of the family dynamic. And then you could see, now I see what it is. And the child itself would say, you know what? I am like my grandfather, who is such and such. So that in other words, in their family is presented in a concrete pictorial way. Yes?
Yeah, I find that I used to do it vertically, now I have to do it horizontally, because there's so many divorces and step families and half brothers, and that I have to start out really big in order to get everyone in.
And that is a visual representation of the family tree.
Yeah,
right? And so instead of talking and tell you, and you figured out, okay, is that the father on the mother's side? That's the grandfather, and how many generations? And you see them all there. Yeah. And then you could bring it out and say, okay, who and with whom having difficulties with whom? And that was so easy. It's a good tool. Questions? Yeah.
Another question, just a comment to say that, like in my practice with the group I work with, it's difficult to even like for them to own it as a share because they're youth justice kids, right? So they're not allowed. A pencil is a weapon. Any writing implement, right? So just doing it orally with them sometimes to understand the dynamics. But for now, I wouldn't have the luxury of having them actually doing it and, doing their own coloring or showing because it is such a dangerous setting.
Mm-hmm.
But I use the oral aspect of it,
right.
Just to say, tell me about the dynamics between grandma, or grandpa or whoever, and you will get the sense of the gist of where the issues might be.
Yeah, I have a question, but go ahead.
In the previous slide, I think I don't see very well. So
okay.
When you're talking about critical examination of power differential and you use the relationship of supervisor-supervisee,
Mm-hmm.
We tend to add that that's organizational identity, and along with it and simultaneously we have to look at social identities.
Yes.
Because those are the essence of counseling, to know who is sitting before you, and the visible and the invisible, to unravel it, because very often our injuries are related with the invisible. And if we don't contextualize, that's where identity politics become very important to us. Otherwise, we reproduce the opposite of what we intended to do, which was to empower in an unequal context.
And also, we have potentially the counselor has higher power over the the client. And then you say, well, you know all the answers. You accept. But then you've got to empower your client to say, you know your situation better than anybody else. And you've got to actually empower them. You see, a lot of clients need empowerment. And I think that's why we're looking at the strength and we're looking for strength, so that using the strength, we could make changes.
Yeah, very often we say you're just like me, and that's very dangerous in the counseling context, the psychotherapy context. It inhibits people from having a discourse of difference.
And this is why self-disclosure is very powerful, but it has to be very careful, and it has to be right, and it has to be used at that particular time and only bring out the effect. Otherwise, we're not doing a good job. Okay, here we go. I think what we'll do, we'll end this slide, obtain training in cross-cultural competence. We cannot just say, oh, yes, I know, I've gone through this, I've been in this, but there are lots of studies that that will enlighten and help you. The second one is examine your transference, counter-transference, and say, oh, I always have problem with this range, I don't that. So you've got to examine yourself and you say, am I hindering the process of counseling and healing? And develop empathy. Take the perspective of the other. So you need a lot of listening skills, processing it, and just kind of, I don't know, can we ever be selfless? No, we can't. But we could understand, and we try to see what other people see, and also communication skills. Now, with the iPad, iPhone, email, sometimes the communication skill could break down because the older generation don't know where to get emails. And sometimes you can't get that would be. But it's always important that we have to learn to communicate. All right. And expand your range of psychological interventions. We talk about that. And also work to enhance the cultural awareness and skills of the situation that you're associated with in your own setting. That would, oops, we're done. It's lunchtime, and have a good lunch. For those who want to carpool to go to restaurants, and you could organize it yourself. And for those who brought lunches, the microwave, oven, toasty oven, and because the weather is so good, the patio is open, the fountain is going, so enjoy your hour and be back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to conclude this webcast and then send a new link in, it'll be about 10 minutes before 1, and you can connect then. Thanks for joining the reconnection, and sorry for the troubles we were having this morning. Thanks, guys.